By the end of this video, you'll know everything there is to know about the sprint goal. This is the last video you'll ever need on the sprint goal. First, let's start with the Scrum Guide 2020. The sprint goal is the single objective for the sprint. Although the sprint goal is a commitment by developers, it provides flexibility in terms of the exact work needed to achieve it. The sprint goal also creates coherence and focus, encouraging the Scrum team to work together rather than on separate initiatives. The sprint goal is created during the sprint planning event and then added to the sprint backlog. As the developers work during the sprint, they keep the sprint goal in mind. If the work turns out to be different than they expected, they collaborate with the product owner to negotiate the scope of the sprint backlog within the sprint without affecting the sprint goal. A sprint goal should be easy to understand. It's often a one-liner supporting a larger theme in your product. To determine the sprint goal, I like using Roman Pichler's 3 questions. Why are we doing the sprint? Why is it worthwhile to do the sprint? What are we trying to achieve with this sprint? Why are we going to work hard as a team to complete all the items in the sprint backlog? Why should stakeholders care about the sprint and care about supporting the team during the sprint? Let's not beat around the bush. A lot of Scrum teams, or I can even say most Scrum teams, don't write proper sprint goals. They just join the sprint planning event. They're in a rush. They take all the user stories that are urgent, throw it in the sprint backlog, and now they are ready to write the sprint goal. So we just read the user stories and take maybe the names of 5 user stories and put that as a sprint goal, or the general theme of a sprint and put that as the sprint goal. We have completed the sprint goal. The sprint backlog is ready. We can start the sprint. But no one knows why we are doing the sprint in the first place. It's not clear. The goal is not specific. There's no reason to do the sprint if you look at the sprint goal. If you see yourself in this, here are 8 reasons why you need to start writing proper sprint goals starting today. Developers can discuss and track progress in the sprint in relation to the sprint goal. Remember, the goal of a sprint is to accomplish the sprint goal. So you need to know at any point in the sprint, how close are you? How close is the team to accomplish the sprint goal? The sprint goal should provide a reason for building the product increment. Remember, when using Scrum, at every end of a sprint, a potentially releasable working increment should be produced by the team. The sprint goal provides shared focus. Everyone in the team is working together to accomplish this single focus, accomplishing the sprint goal by the end of the sprint. You know exactly what we need to do next because the priority is clear. We need to accomplish the sprint goal. The sprint goal helps stakeholders understand the aim of the sprint and know why they should be supporting the team throughout the sprint. The product owner can also use the sprint goal to define the product roadmap. And finally, the sprint goal makes decision making in the sprint an easy task. No longer struggling to decide what's the priority. We already know as a team we need to accomplish the sprint goal by the end of the sprint. All of the other things are second. The first priority is the sprint goal. Now, a good starting point when writing your very first sprint goal, or at least your very first structured sprint goal, is using the 3 questions that we talked about earlier and crafting a good sprint goal. Something that you feel makes sense. We're experimenting here. At any point in the sprint, if you feel that the team is working on so many other things not related to the sprint goal, you already know that it was not a good sprint goal and you can do better in the next sprint. As per the Scrum Guide 2020, the sprint goal shouldn't be changed in the sprint. Remember, the sprint goal is a single objective in the sprint. It's not the entire sprint backlog. No, it's a single objective, something that will bring a lot of value if we put it to the market, if we accomplish that by the end of the sprint. You can't change that. Doesn't mean that you cannot change or reprioritize or shift things in the sprint backlog. Yes, you can do that. You can take things out. You can add things to the sprint backlog. But the sprint goal shouldn't be changed. A common misconception is believing that the product owner is the only person that can write the sprint goal. That's obviously not true. The sprint goal is written in the sprint planning event by the team. The team is working together to see what is achievable in the sprint. What can we do in the sprint in terms of a velocity, in terms of a capacity that we have? And once we know what's achievable in the sprint, once we know the priority, we start filling in the sprint backlog. And then we define the goal. Or we can define the goal prior to filling in the sprint backlog. It all depends on the team. But at the end of the day, the three questions that we talked about earlier needs to be met. We need to know why we are doing all these things. What are we trying to achieve? How will it benefit the customer? Why would stakeholders even care about that? But everyone is crafting it together, not only the product owner. As mentioned earlier, a lot of Scrum teams write very bad sprint goals. Things that I see very often is we need to fix 3 bugs in the sprint. We need to accomplish 3 user stories in the sprint. We need to complete all the items in the sprint backlog. Yeah, people write that as sprint goal. It means nothing. It doesn't motivate me to want to even participate in the sprint. Something better maybe would be related to a problem that we are trying to solve for a customer. Maybe we want to increase conversion for a page, a landing page, by 2% by improving the performance of a page, because we realize that the performance of a page is impacting the conversion. People are clicking out of a page because it's too slow. That's a perfect sprint goal, because it has business value, it has customer value. It really motivates people to work towards this goal together. Another example of a good sprint goal is offering free shipping for orders above $50. We are assuming here that customers will buy more stuff if they get free shipping for orders above $50. So everyone in the team is working towards the sprint goal, changing everything required on the website, the user stories and all that in order to accomplish this sprint goal. It's a motivating sprint goal. We understand why we need to do it as a team. We understand the business impact, the customer impact. Stakeholders would love it because we get more sales. Everyone is on board towards the sprint goal. It's a motivating sprint goal. And this sprint goal can be used, should be used also in the sprint review. Should start by saying, here's the sprint goal for the previous sprint that we just did. Here's the sprint goal. And what did we accomplish as a team in relation to the sprint goal? In the sprint planning event, the first thing that I like doing with teams that I serve is creating the sprint goal. Everyone together, we create the sprint goal, and then we look at the product backlog in terms of priority. We see what items in the product backlog matches the sprint goal. Obviously, items that are ready to be picked. That's the first thing we do, because we have a vision first. And then we find out what do we need to do in order to accomplish this vision. Obviously, things that are achievable, but the developers will say what is achievable in the sprint. But at least we started with a vision. We started with the sprint goal first. And then the sprint goal needs to be confirmed with stakeholders to ensure that everyone is on the same page. We are going into the right direction. And the sprint goal also during the sprint needs to be in the mind of everyone. Write it on a wall somewhere, put it on the Jira board, write it on the computers, the wallpapers of everyone in the team. Everyone needs to be aware of the sprint goal 24/7. When writing the sprint goal, I like using an exercise by Bob Galen, who wrote multiple Scrum books. It tells you to imagine, when writing the sprint goal, imagine that you're writing an email to invite all the stakeholders and the team to the sprint review. What would you say in the subject of this email to get everyone excited to attend the sprint review? That's your sprint goal. Which brings me to my next point. If you want more tips, insights on Agile, Scrum, personal growth, click on the video that stands out the most on the screen right now, and I'll see you in a few seconds.